So in this episode, I chat with Jacques Greeff, who founded a company with his two brothers called Realbase. The company powered marketing campaigns for real estate agencies, and they eventually went on to sell that company for $180 million, which is a pretty awesome story. So in our chat, we dive into the origin story of how they founded the company, and then Jacques dives into a whole bunch of lessons that he's learned along the way. He drops so much business and life advice that you wouldn't want to miss. So without further ado, let's kick into the episode. All right, so today I have Jacques Greeff on the podcast. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
There's so many things I want to dive into today, but I wanted to start things off right back at the beginning, the genesis story of RealHub and Realbase. So talk me back through, how did you guys come up with the idea for it?
So we started actually originally in photography services for real estate. So I used to draw floor plans. I don't know if you know, like for a property, you draw up the floor plan, I'd go in and measure the house, and then we'd get a floor plan to the agents. And from there, we segued sort of naturally into printing. So a signboard out the front of the house, brochures when you get to the open home, and we ran like a bit of a print operation. Okay. The problem with the print operation is we didn't have like a really streamlined way to get the order. So customers would literally have to call us and be like, I want 250 brochures, and you'd take down the notes and you'd do their order. So it was a really like fragmented, slow, inefficient process. And we sort of came up with this idea that we need to have an ordering platform that was seamless. So a real estate agency could go online, they could customize or sort of design their signboard, the artwork for it, with their logo and the photos that they want to choose in the ad copy. They could customize their brochures, and then they could submit the order to us and we would print it. So we came up with that concept and we built the platform. And the platform was basically just a seamless way for agencies to order their marketing materials from us as the printer. So we were the only supplier on the platform. It was just to solve our problem. We built that over about a year and we launched it. And our revenue basically doubled overnight because now we could go and grab a bunch more customers because it was way more efficient to do that process. And we quickly realized like this platform is much bigger than our print operation can sort of satisfy, because we'd get customers asking for us to do, they'd get to the platform and they'd be like, do you guys service like the outer west area? And we're like, we don't really do that because we have to get in the ute and put a sign up out there. So we opened the platform up to essentially allow other suppliers to integrate into it. So if you're a big printing operation in Western Australia, the customer can use our platform to order, and we'll send the order off to them to print, manufacture, and do the job. But we'll just take a small percentage fee.
Okay.
And we just started building on that. So we quickly realized like this isn't just a platform for ourselves, this is a marketplace. Because the key problem for an agency is if I've got multiple suppliers, I've got to go over here for the photography, I get the photos back here, I load them into this system for brochure printing, I load them into another system for a signboard, I load them into another system to send to realestate.com. And so there's heaps of double handling of that property data, just basic stuff like the photos or the ad copy. So there's just like a lot of manual and a lot of mistakes can happen. And the other thing that agencies really struggle with is keeping track of the costings. So an average marketing campaign, I don't know if you know this, is probably about $5,000 to $10,000 worth of advertising expense.
Okay.
On all different piecemeal places. And so there wasn't really a great way to track where everything's going, what's happening, what needs to be delivered to where. And so that part of the platform became like the key selling point.
Okay.
And so we built that out. And there was only really one major competitor in the space that was doing that sort of stuff.
In Australia?
Wow.
Wow.
So, I mean, we tell people when they're like, I never heard of you, didn't even know what you were doing. And it's because it's like the market's quite small, but the tech, is really, it wasn't like a pretty like cool, exciting tech. It's like you're putting up fucking signboards. It's quite boring.
Yeah, okay.
So the one major competitor, they didn't need to improve their process. They didn't need to improve their tech. They were just making money hand over fist because they were the only player in that space. And so we just kind of, as time went on, started chipping away at their market share. And like we were doing a really lean team where they were like huge, buying yachts and like, killing it.
That's wild.
Yeah, so we launched in 2015. By 2020, we'd made enough noise in the industry, we'd taken enough market share, and the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden our competitor was in a bind, which is like they've got all these overheads, much bigger business than us. And so they came to us and said, can we do a merger?
So they initiated that.
They initiated it.
No way.
And I remember so clearly, I said to my brother, like, don't go to this meeting. The guy's going to kill you. Because we'd like agitated them so much. I was like, this is like, my brother's like, no, trust me. This is worth a conversation at least. But the point being there is he went into this conversation almost like, I don't care what the outcome is. So he just said, the only way we're going to do a merger is if it's 50-50.
Wow.
And they were like, okay, because it's a race of it's a war of attrition. You guys are going to win because you're younger, you're hungrier. We were I think we were about 8 times smaller than them at the time.
Oh, wait, and you managed to get a 50-50.
And we got a 50-50 merger. It was just because at that time we're smaller, but in 3 years' time, we're going to be bigger and we're just going to keep chipping away and we're going to keep chipping away. So we merged those entities. I think the deal, it's so funny, we were talking about this the other day, the deal started conversations in July. We were merged in the same offices, businesses together in October.
Whoa.
So it was really, really quick. And all of a sudden, overnight, we went from a team of about 50 to a team of 400.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, now we've got this new problem, which is how we steer these ships together.
What was that like going from a team of 50 to 400? Because even in the early days, it was just you and your 2 brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a wild transformation.
It was hard enough to manage 50 people. You know, that was a lot of learning lessons from 3 to 10 to 50. But to go overnight and all of a sudden you have 400 people that you've got to worry about, and there's this huge culture piece where we were enemies, and all of a sudden we've got to be like, no, we're friends. So you've got to take that was the biggest learning lesson. It was like, it's all about the people. Like you can have a great business, but it's all about getting the people to feel like we're all going in the same direction. We've all got the same vision.
Okay. It's all about the people in terms of the employees?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So like you've got to, when you've got a team of 10, it's so easy to be like the key cog in the wheel, right? You can push the business where you need to push it. When you get to 400, the skill set's very different because you can't just do everything anymore. You've got to inspire people. You've got to motivate people. You've got to get people aligned to where the business needs to go. So that's like a massive overnight. Like we need to change our approach, because our approach in the early days is we'll just do everything. We're going to make this work. And it's like, okay, now overnight, how do we have to become like motivators? We've become leaders in a different way. So it was like a huge learning lesson going through that process. It was crazy. Like the amount of energy it takes to take 2 companies and actually effectively merge them is wild. It's a lot. It's a lot of like, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of processes. It's a lot of like taking 2 systems, even on a technical side. How do you take 2 platforms that were like completely different stacks at odds with each other and make them work together? It was a massive learning lessons for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like an imposter? Like, did you ever have like imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Being like, how are we here with a 400-person team? Like,
Yes. So that's something I think that never goes away. It's so funny to say that, because it's like all of a sudden, I mean, I was 30 years old, and you're telling like people that have been in business for 20 years, they're older than you. You've been at this company for longer than I was in high school when you started working for this company, and now I'm telling you what to do. So there's a lot of that where you've got to kind of like really, really just back yourself and back the decisions that you make. Because at the end of the day, when you do a merger like that, you're going to ruffle a few feathers, right? You've got a lot of crossover of roles. You got to figure out where everyone sits in this big org chart. All of a sudden, you've got a board meetings. We never had board meetings. All of a sudden, we're having board meetings. So there's a lot of that like intense learning, and that like imposter syndrome, it never goes away, because you're always going to feel like, I'm just a kid. I don't know, why am I at this board meeting? Like, I'm just a kid. And so you've just got to constantly stack those little wins and those little achievements to make it feel like, okay, no, I do belong to be here. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned about learning how that to conquer that imposter syndrome, you did a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Was it mostly learning through experience, or did you kind of learn through books and podcasts? Like, how are you learning and upskilling?
So this is sort of the big one for me is, in business, there are so many awesome opportunities to get better at anything. So I would describe myself as a generalist, where I'm not particularly good at one thing. Like I don't have like one skill set where it's like, that's his thing. But I have the ability to learn about marketing enough. I have the ability to learn about sales enough. I have the ability to learn about software enough to be effective that I can like contribute. So the best thing about being a business owner is you can do anything you want that piques your interest. If you're curious about software and you run a software company, you can learn to code. You know what I mean? You don't have to be stuck in your one role. You can learn how to be an effective leader. So for us, it's like anytime we came up against a problem, so my brother's a perfect example of this, we don't know sales, but we're out there selling every day. So you go and then do a sales course and learn how to be a better salesman. For me, it was like, I don't know software, but I'm running a software company here, so I should learn at least how to write code. And so I can speak to our software developers in a language that they understand, right? I can actually like empathize with the problems, because there's always a big disconnect in like the product people and the sales people and the tech, right? Like the sales people are like, just of course it make it do that, this and that. Like it's so obvious. Like the customer says they want that. And then the tech guy's going, oh, far out. Okay, like that's a full rework of our infrastructure. It's not as easy as it seems. So being that gap in there and saying, okay, you know the business side super, super well. You know where the business needs to go. But the big gap is I don't know software at all. It's like an alien language to me. Can I learn enough to bridge that gap? And so that's like the beauty of it. You can just dive in, do a few courses. You've got a practical application for the knowledge. It's not just learning for the sake of learning.
Yeah.
It's learning so that you can go, I can get involved there. Like I can actually help.
That's pretty unreal. Like how did you go about learning coding and software development? Because that's like people go to uni for like 4 years to learn that, and you're just like self-teaching yourself. Like,
well, so I've got my eldest brother is like a genius savant programmer.
Okay.
So that's like a really, really great asset to have.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of online courses in Udemy.
Okay.
And straight away you can just dive into, I'll just do these random features that no one wants to do. I can just do these tiny little bits and pieces. Like when you've got the exact thing you're trying to achieve, like I want this system to do this specific thing, I want to learn how to do that. That's the best application. You learn so much faster because it's not like theoretical learning. You're not learning about a to-do list or something that has no application to your business. You're like, I want to solve that specific problem. So you can go deep on one specific problem, and then all of a sudden you can start teaching people. That's how you get better. It's like learn, and then as soon as you've learned, teach, and it solidifies the knowledge so much quicker. And then if you have like geniuses around you, which I'm so lucky I have, I can always be like, how would you do this? How would you do that? You know, like, and they're willing to help you because like the outcome is better for everyone.
That's very cool. Yeah, I heard on a podcast, your brother Frank, he described your role as you do whatever is required in the business and then you try to make yourself redundant, which I thought was a very interesting like strategy of going about your role. So like how did you kind of find that role, and yeah, was that a very intentional thing that you did?
Yeah, so I think founders, one of the biggest problems they have is they become precious about what they personally can contribute to the business. So a founder's like, I'm the CEO. Yeah, you were the CEO when you had 4 people. It's very different than being the CEO when there's 100 people. There might be better people out there at that job than you do, you know what I mean? So if you're not the best person for the role, you should be stepping aside and getting someone else in who can be better in that position. So for me, it was like starting out, you're a team of 3. I'm going to be head of operations. You can be head of anything. I think at one minute my LinkedIn was head of marketing. What does that mean? I sent a few emails. Like, it's nothing. But very quickly you're like, okay, operations, I'm creating a framework, but I don't think I'm actually the best for this job. Because operations, you've got to manage people. You've got to do a lot of things that I'm not the best at. So I can create the framework, at least the starting block. I can train people, and then I can say, okay, you take it from here. I got you to level 3. You take it from level 3 to the next level, and I can then see where else I can help out. Instead of being like, no, I'm the guy that's operations, and I'm just going to stay there for as long as the business grows. So a founder, like, I think the most, like, it's adaptability, and it's also humility to say, like, I'm probably not the best at that. To be fair, a founder is probably not the best at anything. You should be bringing in people that are 10 times better than you in specific disciplines, because that's what's better for the business at the end of the day.
So what would you say you see the role of the founder is if it's to ultimately, I guess, like replace yourself in certain roles? Like, how do you see the founder playing out as you scale?
Yeah, so that's it. So the founder, really, you want to set the vision, the direction, the enthusiasm, the energy for the business. But in terms of specific roles, you want to be good enough to understand it and talk to people and get them going. But realistically, like a founder, the main role is like you want to be the CEO essentially. But again, there's better CEOs out there. So you really want to be useful as much as you can to a level and then find where else you can be useful. You really want to be everywhere. You want to understand as much as you can understand and not be like, I don't really understand that. It's not my department. Because you're not going to get the right feedback, right? If you're like, that's not my department, they can tell you whatever they need to tell you. Like software is a good example, right? I can say, how long is this feature going to take? And someone says 3 months. If I have no idea about software, I'll be like, okay, it's 3 months.
Well, that's a dream if it actually comes out in 3 months.
Well, I mean, it's like if I have an idea, I'll be like, no, have you thought about it this way? Or how do we, I can actually contribute a little bit more if I have a vague understanding or a good understanding of that thing. So I think founders need to be, I think the best term is an effective generalist in your business. You need to be effective in a lot of different areas, but realistically, you don't want to be precious to being like, no, that's my domain. Because then there's key man risks, right?
Key man risks?
Like you're a key person in your business. When you're scaling business, when you're selling business, the company doesn't want to go, this business is going to break down if you're not here.
Okay.
Right? So people don't think about that. It's like, what's the long-term vision of your business? It's like, I can walk away for 3 months and the business is going to run without me. That's the goal, right? Instead of being like, oh, I need to be the guy that does that thing. So the business is always going to rely on you and you're never going to be able to scale. You're going to be stuck in this kind of like 10 to 50 person team and you're going to be capped in what you can earn.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess that would have been pretty pivotal for you guys as you scaled and you merged with, was it Campaign Tracker and then ultimately with Domain. I'd love to chat a little bit about being bought by Domain. What was the process like leading up to that? Because you guys sold the business for $180 million, which is a pretty crazy headline. Yeah, so what was the process like leading up to that?
We always had the idea that post-merger we were going to sell. We were like, the business, if you've got two companies that are competing in a very sort of small market, the only way you can do it is by bringing your prices down. So you're actually ruining the market. As a merged entity, we were like I think something like 50% market share as a merged entity. So now you can actually stabilize prices. So we're like, that's the better environment. The end goal is a sale.
Okay.
The process.
So you always envision an end sale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the process of the sale though was a nightmare. It was like it took 10 years off my lifespan. Like it was so. First of all, you've got companies that have just merged, so the books are an absolute disaster. You've made a bunch of decisions to sort of silo certain businesses. You've made a bunch of decisions to like change the way you're positioned in the market. You've rebranded. You've got to. We've got contracts that like are legacy contracts that we need to renegotiate to make them like stable and actually like have like another 3 years on them. So that's real like recurring revenue. But when you're going through a sale like that, you've got to do basically 7 years of due diligence on this company and 7 years of due diligence on this company, all the way back to when, there's a couple of kids in a garage and you've got to like present like so much information to the purchaser. And you're doing it in a competitive process, which is multiple potential purchases. So you've got just these questions that are coming through about a random board meeting that happened 4 years ago. Can you clarify what you guys said here? I don't remember saying any of that. And they've got all these documents. So it's just the process. It took a year. So
it took a year.
We merged and 18 months later we were sold. I think it took about a year from like, okay, we're gonna go down the process. And we learned a lot about how that process works. But essentially it was just like questions after questions after questions, and you've got to come up with your financial forecasting model that's just on the back of a spreadsheet or a back of a napkin. You've got to make things really legit. So it was a very, very intense process, and I learned a lot as well. Yeah.
Okay, so you said it took 10 years off your life. I'm curious why you say that. What was kind of like the stressful or hard moments about that?
Yeah, so when you're selling a business, you are committing to spending millions of dollars on lawyers and accountants and brokers, but you don't get paid until the deal is finalized. Okay. So you're essentially saying, I'm going to take all my energy as a like a leadership team. You know, there's probably about 10 of us at the time. We're all going to focus on the sale of the business, but who's running the business? So you're kind of juggling these two things, like this potential sale and then like what's actually happening in your business. Like you've got to keep growing. You've got to keep like operating.
Yeah.
But you're focusing on all these other things where people are asking questions. So Frank, my brother, he spent the entire year just focused on the deal. He didn't even really get to like be involved in the business because there was no time to be involved in the business.
Wow.
So it's incredibly stressful. So you're imagining like you're running along a bridge and the back it's collapsing as you're running. And you've got to get to the goal because you're spending as well on the process and you have no guarantees. And the market, like you're looking at the market and we're obviously in this big upswing, but what's going to happen on the other end of that?
Yeah.
So there's all this uncertainty. You've got a great thing that it might happen, but there's no guarantees. So you're constantly in this kind of fight or flight feeling, like could it all fall down in an instant? And then a news article comes out, it's like Russia and Ukraine are having a war. I'm like, stop, don't do that right now. Like, can you pause the war for a second? And that was like 2 months before our deal was going to close.
Was it? Okay, wow.
So I'm like, oh, are we in World War III now? All of a sudden. So there's just so many things that are just, you know, like stressing you out in that process.
Because you mentioned, like I saw on Instagram, you made this really great quote where you talked about how sometimes in life there's almost this separation between all the hard work you're doing and the actual fruit of the labor that you're doing. You have this separation where I'm working towards this thing, but I'm not seeing the fruit right now. So I'm curious to know, like, how did you know? Because you talked about this story where you said, like, at one point you were in this $100 million company, but you were sleeping on a mattress in the living room.
Yes.
And so how did you have the belief that this was something massive and it was going to sell for $180 million when I guess that sometimes there would have been doubts in your own mind and doubts from other people, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah.
So,
like you've got this crazy separation, which is I hope this works out and I'm doing all the right things that will make it work out. But then you're always kind of checked by your own reality, which is, for me, we were in a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 kids. I was sleep training my daughter, so she had our master bedroom. My son was in his bedroom, and my wife and I were on a mattress on the floor. And so I'd just go to this dinner with these executives, and they're all talking, and these numbers are being thrown around like hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm like, yeah, that sounds really good. Let's maybe we could sharpen the pencil there and make it a bit more. And then I go home, and I'm sleeping on the floor. And so the only thing that can really get you through that is I know what I'm doing right now is the right thing, even if there's zero feedback that it's there. You know, like monetary feedback is the most obvious one. Like I'm killing it because the money's in the bank. But a lot of the times as a founder or as an entrepreneur, like the first 5 years of your business, you're probably financially going backwards. So there's none of that feedback. Like your customers are loving the product, but as you're growing, you're just reinvesting all your money. So there's not really like a profit to be had or there's no spoils of that. And most of the time, like any little dip in the market or any little change, you're reinvesting. And so all you have to kind of keep going is like, this is the right decision. I'm trusting that it's the right decision. I'm hoping that it's the right decision. But you really have no feedback. So it's like faith. Yeah. It's like hope. You've kind of you know that if you had to make a decision on where to spend your money, you would spend it there, even if it doesn't come back in 5 years, or even if it doesn't come back immediately or in 10 years or whatever it is. I know that this is the right way to invest my time, invest my energy, invest my money.
So was that like a very internal kind of faith?
Yeah.
It wasn't like externally from your brothers or anything. It was mainly kind of internal.
Well, that's the beauty of it. We had each other as well. So a lot of people, entrepreneurs will say this, it's quite lonely. They'll go through these struggles and they have no one to bounce that, those moments off with. I was very lucky that I had 2 people in my life that were just as hungry, just as motivated, all in it together. So we had each other in those moments to be like, no, we're doing the right things here, guys. Like we're gonna make it. And we had that around the office every day. It's like, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. Like if things go bad, we're gonna make it. And if things go wrong, don't worry, we'll get it on the next one. Don't worry, we'll get it on the next one. So it's like this kind of almost toxic positivity where it doesn't matter what's happening. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. So yeah,
that's incredible that you guys kind of had that bond. I'm curious to kind of dive into a little bit of like what it was like to grow a business with your brothers, because like I've worked for my brother's business and it's always kind of been a dream of ours to one day launch another business. And so my brother's much wiser than I am, and he's a really good operator, but I'm probably not at the skill level that he is, but it's kind of a dream that we've had, to one day run a business. So I'm just curious, how was it, I guess, growing a business together as brothers, and were there always like good times, were there hard times? Yeah, what did you find?
It's the best. Honestly, it's the best. Like the biggest luck factors I'd say in my life are my parents. I've got incredibly hardworking parents that we all could look to and say, like, that is the model for how you should be as a person. And the second one is, like, I've gotten so lucky that I have two brothers and we all balance each other out so perfectly. So on one side, I've got this genius tech, like, savant. On the other side, I've got this like networking salesman, like, can make friends with anyone, like this. He's got the gift of the gab, and it's like this perfect. It's this perfect blend of personality types and traits. But the core is we all are in it together, and it doesn't matter if it like gets really heated or there's moments where there is a lot of moments of like this is really tough. You're never going to be let down by those people, right? So there's never like you're not working as hard as me, or you don't think I'm working as hard as you. There's never that kind of like distrust. We all know that, like, when it's shit, we're all together. When it's good, we're all together. So it's like this amazing sort of jumping off point. You know how people say, like, you're the aggregate of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like, I was so lucky because I'm like the aggregate of the 2 people I spend the most time with, and those are my brothers. It's like a perfect environment. It's tough, obviously, because you're taking your business chats to the dinner table, to the gym. So it never stops, and you're at like Christmas and hey, we know what we should do, and you're having like chats about business. But that's the best way to do it, you know. So it's the single biggest like contributing factor to our success.
The single biggest contributing factor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay. Well, I'd love to kind of like ask you a little bit about what it was like on the day you guys finalized the deal. So I'm curious to know if there was a lot of relief or excitement, or were you kind of just ready to be like, I'm walking away from business forever, or like what was it like on that first day?
So the way it works is you close the deal, it's announced to the market, big hurrah. The money doesn't hit your bank account for another 3 months.
Oh, so it was 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
So there's a cooling off period where it's done and dusted, but the money hasn't hit the bank account. So there's an intense stress of like waiting and anticipation. But I remember it so clearly, like the day the deal finalized in terms of like money in the bank, I went on a holiday to Byron Bay. I was like, okay, finally relax. And I refreshed my bank account and it went from $800 to $27 million.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just one refresh like that. And I was like, my life has literally changed in 3 seconds here. And so there's a feeling of like immense relief, but at the same time now it's like, what do I do next? Like I've spent my whole life as this person is this business. And then it's like, who am I as a person now outside of that? I've spent so much energy. It's like my whole personality. Yeah. So for me, it was like this, how do I now like pay back all those things that I sacrificed? Like, how do I spend more time with my kids? How do I invest back into my health? So those are the big sort of questions that I wanted to answer, is like, I've put a lot of things on pause during this process. I've sacrificed a lot. Can I pay back some of those debts? So like, can I actually now like take a breather, enjoy that moment? Because everyone's like, I can't wait till I get here. And when you get there, you're like, hey, what's next? It becomes like, what's next? You never really just sit in that moment and be like, okay, what can I do to like pay back that balance of dysfunction?
Okay.
Just relax. Yeah.
That's interesting. So was that like an immediate thought, like the day it hit your bank account? Or was that like something that kind of took a couple of months before you were like, I want to pay back all these things. I want to invest in my family, invest in my health?
It was pretty immediate because you put a lot of things on pause during that process, especially in that deal process. And there was a kind of a building of somewhat of guilt, which is like, I'm just all in here. I'm like got the blinkers on. I'm barely present because I'm just wanting to focus on this one goal. So it's like, when I get to that goal, I want to take a breath. I want to relax. A lot of people don't do that. They just go, what's the next goal? So it's like, okay, can I make a conscious effort to rework my life and build that foundation back up? And so when the next thing comes, I've got this solid foundation that I can sort of take the jump from.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that kind of look like? Because I guess you've kind of been in that season for a while, and how did you go about, building that foundation of health and family? Yeah. What were the kind of the things you did? Did your routines change?
Yeah.
Were you waking up earlier or later? How did that all change?
Well, the key for me is there's three major components of life. It's business, family, and health. I think you can only do two correctly. Okay. You can only do two successfully. You can't be all three at a hyper successful level. There has to be trade-offs. So for me, it was okay, the business thing I can almost park completely now. And I can focus on family, and that is the mundane aspects of family. I'm going to drop my kids off at school every single day. I'm going to pick them up from school every single day. And the other one is health. What's the point of running at 100 miles an hour if you're killing yourself and you're just going to have a heart attack at 45? So I need to build this baseline of health that anything I do in the future, it's a non-negotiable. I cannot sacrifice my health. So for me, it was I want to exercise every single day for a minimum of an hour and a half. I want to lift weights. I want to run. I want to be in the sauna. I want to live like I'm an athlete, like I'm a professional athlete. And I did. I was okay, I'm going to do that. So what does a professional athlete do? They wake up at the same time every day. They train at the same time. They have a good recovery process. Their diet's perfect. And that framework was the greatest framework ever, because now I'm that's the baseline. That's the baseline for how I live my life. And it's the same with family. It's to be truly present, you've got to be present in the really kind of boring, mundane stuff. It's not all glitz and glam with kids. It's I'm sitting there playing Lego with my son for hours on end. And it's that's what it's about. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Where did that importance for family come from? Did you always have this really high value on family growing up? Or was this kind of once you started your own family, this kind of came about?
Family's always been super important. But once I had my own kids, it was a massive change in me as a person.
It was a massive change.
Massive change. So it's
Really?
Overnight, all of a sudden, this is serious. I have kids that rely on me. So so it's so funny. The most business success I had was in the time when I had two children, because
Really?
it reframed everything that I was doing to this is actually important. I'm not gonna waste any time. I've got a very, very finite amount of time to make this work. So everything I do has to be effective. When you're single and you're young, that you can fall into a bit of a trap of I've got plenty of time. I can sleep it on the weekends. I can do whatever. But when you've got kids, it focuses you to very important. This is very important. I have to do this. I'm giving up time with my family to do this, so I better do it right. Okay. I better not sit here wasting time scrolling my phone, moving my mouse around on my screen. Killing time. I better make this effective because I'm giving up time with my family.
Okay.
So it was the biggest reframe for me is everything you do now counts. And again, my situation was, I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment. My kids are getting older. We got to make it here. I can't stay in this situation forever.
Yeah.
So it's gave me very, very strong direction in what I needed to do.
So is that advice for founders? Get kids pretty early? Or? No, I'm joking.
Yes. Have as many kids as you can and then feel the pressure.
Yeah, I can imagine as an advisor, you're going into startups being who's got kids?
Yeah. It's game time.
No, that's actually really cool. So it almost drove you even faster to go, I've really got to do this.
Yes, exactly.
Was there a bit of a hunger and a scarce mindset kind of there where it was I've got to make this work?
Yeah.
And was that pretty important, do you think, in getting it to work?
Yeah, I think the best mindset you can be in as a founder is when you have nothing to lose because you're so close to the bottom of the barrel anyway, because it forces you to just take extreme action. When you're comfortable, the golden handcuffs. If I'm on a $400,000 a year salary, I'm probably not going to be motivated to get out there and make things happen. And it's the same with kids. I've got these kids that are relying on me. They've got to go to school, daycare. There's all these expenses that are going to start racking up. There's an urgency now. And that's the thing. When you've got that urgency, it's not scarcity as much as it is I've got to focus, because if I don't, these people that are relying on me are going to be let down. Okay. And so it really creates that intense focus that you need.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to ask you, as you reflect back on, your whole life now, and that's, as you mentioned, there was kind of 3 key pillars, and at different points you've kind of, focused on certain ones more and less. But I'm curious to know what kind of, I guess, main lessons have you taken away from looking back on your life? Like if a 20-year-old was to come up to you now and say, hey, what should I focus on for the rest of my life? Or what's been your biggest takeaways? What do you think like you'd, I guess, say to them?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for me is you've got to constantly be learning and evolving as a founder. So what your skills were when you set up a business are very different to when the business starts getting momentum. So if you're a very good, coder and you set up some software, that's amazing. But eventually you're going to have a software team. So now you've got to be better at leading people and getting them in line with what you want to achieve. So learning as much as possible, not just for the sake of it, for the practical applications of it. So if you're constantly willing to a perfect example is I've got a business that's extremely successful. Am I humble enough to go all the way back to sort of level 1 and learn a skill that I know I should have? It's marketing or it's sales. It's uncomfortable for me to do that because I'm not like a charismatic salesman, but can I go back and get at least somewhat good at that? So it's the constant hunger and ability to learn is super, super important. The other one I would say is founders need to get incredibly good at is communication.
Communication.
Yes. So can you communicate effectively? So can you communicate to your team? That's a massive one. You're constantly communicating with your team. You're constantly inspiring them. You're constantly aligning them to your vision. Can you communicate to stakeholders, investors, customers? That's the biggest skill that you can have. It's can you get what's in your brain out to people and it makes sense.
Okay.
So it's those key skills that you have to constantly evolve.
How are you going about getting better at communication? Because I think since starting this podcast, I've been, I think, trying to actively think about, how can I get better at communicating? And it's definitely a process which I'm still learning a lot about. But yeah, how did you go about getting better at communicating? Was it just practice?
Get the reps in. It's anything.
Okay.
Anything you want to get better at is put yourself in a situation where you're not good at something and just get the reps in, and you're going to get the feedback. You're gonna be like, oh shit, I said that wrong. Okay. I'll do it different this next time. I'll do it better the next time. So it's anything you want to get better at. Just get the reps in. Do it as much as you need to do it, and don't be like, I did it once. It was bad. Do it again, and you're going to get 1% better. Do it again, you're going to get a little bit better, and eventually, it's I'm good at this now. You know what I mean? But it's that ability to put yourself in a situation where you're like, I'm crap at this thing, and I'm not going to shy away from it. Because you can, if it's your business, it's your own company, you can shy away from things you don't like as much as you want to do the things you do like. You can be like, oh, that's not really, I'm not really about that.
Yeah. Did you have that kind of tendency to do that? Or
a lot. And you've got to push against that constantly. So if there's things that you feel like are not a skill that you're naturally good at, sales is a great one because it's uncomfortable. You don't want to have an uncomfortable negotiation or someone's telling you your product's crap and you're like, no, please don't say that. So you've just got to put yourself in that environment as much as possible.
Okay.
My brother's a perfect example of this. He was a chef. He was not a salesperson, but he just went out there and he just did it day in, day out. He took as much knowledge as he could on board, and eventually he's the best salesman ever. It's because he consumed knowledge. He got the reps in, and now it's he's a sales trainer. He can lead sales teams because he's so good at it.
That's unreal. Yeah. Okay. So getting the reps in, that's really good. Okay. I like that. I'm curious to ask, who have been the, I guess, role models in your life that you've looked up to in life? Were you looking up to fitness role models or sports influencers or, were there kind of particular people that you consumed their content or really helped you, and they in person and I guess online? Yeah, I'm curious to know who were kind of your role models.
Yeah, so probably the biggest role models were my brothers, because it's just such easy access to genius minds. Outside of that, I remember spending so much time listening to. You got to remember this was about 2015, so it's the content and the podcast scene wasn't as big then. But
yeah.
I would read a lot of books, a lot of marketing books by Seth Godin, stuff like that. So in terms of proper actual role models, there was almost few and far between. I think the parallel for sports is a really good one. So you see someone crushing it in sport, Kobe Bryant. You're like, that guy is he's got something there. You can apply that same framework, discipline, that mentality to business so easily. So that's a really good one for anyone in business. The motivation through sport, I think is huge. It's untapped. You can get a lot from that, a lot of transference from that. But nowadays, there's just so much out there. You can take your pick. You can go anywhere. There's so many good resources. But I don't think we had anything like, I don't remember any single biggest sort of influence or anything like that during those days.
That's very wholesome, saying your brothers. I quite like that.
Yeah.
That's usually a lot of people will say like, XYZ figure, but that's very cool that you can say your brothers.
It was a massive unfair advantage for us. Is like people go out and look for mentors. They go and look for people that are like inspirational. But I feel like we just had that. We just had that naturally with each other. Like if I want to learn how to be like a software coding savant, I got one right there. I can just talk to him and ask him questions. If I want to learn how to be a charismatic salesman, I've got one right there. I can just learn and talk to him. So there's just that amazing, it was just an amazing blend that I could pull from and learn from.
That's awesome. I love that so much. So yeah, I'm curious to chat about the future and what it looks like for you going into the future. I saw you've been putting out a lot of personal brand stuff on Instagram and jumping on the podcast and doing that as well. So I'm curious, are you kind of looking to go into a new business? Are you working in stealth mode?
Yeah.
Are you going to be pumping out the content? What do you see for the future?
For the content, I think the world that we live in now, you can build such an interesting attraction model that wasn't available when we started our business. So starting a business now, I think the must-have is the founder-led brand story. It makes so much sense, right? Like documenting the process. It might not seem interesting, but when you build up that huge archive of this was what I did every step of the way, it's amazing. It's so robust. And I've only been on Instagram for a few weeks, and I'm already getting people reaching out. And it's like, well, that's the new world that we live in. You've got to put yourself out there, and you can attract people to you rather than going to try and find them. So a perfect example of this, if you're looking for employees, instead of going on LinkedIn these days or connecting through a recruiter, put yourself out there on Instagram, and then you put a job ad out. You'll see the applications that come through. People know you, they know your story, they can already relate to you. It's an amazing natural filtering process. So it's opened my eyes in a massive way. It's the attraction piece is so important. So everyone should do that. It's almost it doesn't matter what field you're in, what business you're in, you should be doing that because the connection that you can build out there is incredible. So for me, it's okay, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of what's next for business, I think where I see myself being valuable, useful, is in the entrepreneur founder space. It's we've gone through this process from beginning to end. It's quite a lot of lessons. There's quite a lot of information there that I feel like it can be useful. So for me, it's giving back as much as possible, mentoring, advising, helping out people. It's just purely on I know what that looks like. I can help you. I know exactly how you're feeling in this process. There's that relatability. But then also you get incredible amounts of deal flow, which is the sort of selfish side of it, which is as an investor, I want to work with and invest in and help founders with interesting businesses that are solving interesting problems. And the best way to do that is sort of make myself known to them and then, work with them in that way.
I see. So is that going to be the main focus, is doing the personal brand content and then using that to invest in companies?
Yeah. So
okay.
The way we see the VC landscape at the moment is super corporate. There's founders doing really interesting, exciting things, and the access to capital is through this really kind of archaic system where here's a check and I'll see you later, maybe I get a board seat. Okay. But really what a founder wants is, it's the money is fine, but they also want the guidance. And if those two things can come hand in hand, it's can you find a business that as an investor, you can have a material impact on the success? So you're not just giving a check and walking away. You're saying okay, these are the levers that we need to pull for the business to almost guarantee the success. And that's where I see this very, very interesting challenges, very, very interesting community. And it energizes me to be around that.
Okay. Are there any particular types of businesses or industries that you are kind of actively looking into? Is it kind of tech, or is it physical businesses? What kind of, or you just anything?
The key thing that we look for isn't necessarily the business. It's the founder. It's the person.
Okay, the person.
Yeah. So the main determining factor, I think, is the person. It's not really the product. So you can come up with an idea, take it to market, and if you're the right type of person, you can tweak that a million ways before you have something that's legit. It's like a perfect example is like Notion. You know, Notion.
I love Notion.
They launched a product, no one liked it. They iterated, they launched it again, no one liked it. They iterated, they launched it again. It was like 5 years of the journey, and all of a sudden they've got a business with 100 million users.
Yeah.
Because the people in that business were willing to come through like, okay, that's good feedback, let's change it. That's good feedback, let's change it. It's the type of person that's receptive to that will end up with the right result. Versus a great product that just is great overnight. You don't know those things. You really can only bet on what the person's going to be able to do. So no, we basically speak to everyone, and once you get a good feel from them, you're like, oh no, that business makes sense. I can actually help that business. It's more about like, what's my input to the business to make it successful? If I don't know anything about it, I'm not going to get involved because I'm like, it confuses me. So I'll just sit that one out. But no, it's basically anything.
Okay, anything. So you mentioned like one of the core things was people, and that was a big focus. And you mentioned that you like founders that are feedback orientated. They're looking to iterate, looking to receive customer feedback. What do you think are like some of the other traits in founders that you really like? And yeah, what do you kind of see a successful founder as having? What kind of traits do you see them having?
Yeah, you've got to have the obvious ones, grit, determination, all those things. But then there's also this intangible need to like make something of yourself. So the common story is like, I was a kid at school and I was bullied and I didn't have any friends. And I was like, I'll show you. And then that person tends to have this kind of different driver. It's almost spite. It's almost like this, I'll show you that I'm going to be successful. And it's like this common thread that I see in super successful people. It's like, how did you come up with this product? Well, I was bullied at school and I didn't have any friends. And so I went out there and I did business, and now he's like, I'm worthy. And it's like almost like this weird insecurity where it's like either financial insecurity, you were poor growing up, like we were poor growing up. So it's like we need to, we had this like desire to become successful. And it's like, those are the intangible things. It's like almost hard to explain. It's like this inner drive that's not just I'm going to do this because I want to make a bunch of money. It's like I want to do this to like show people that I'm worthy almost in a weird way. So it's those little like minor personality characteristics that if you mapped it against everyone who's successful, they'd all have this common trait, which is like it's almost an insecurity that they're running away from.
Did you have a little bit of that?
Yeah, 100%. So like we were dirt broke when we were kids. Like my parents, my dad went through a bankruptcy, and we were living in a caravan, like on a random block of land. And we moved from country to country, and we were always like the poor kids, you know what I mean? So like my parents would work in a fish processing plant, filleting fish, picking apples on an orchard, filling up a pallet of apples for $40. It's like real hard, grafty stuff. And so we saw that, and there's this kind of like, I want to build on. I want to be like, I want to make it. I want to become something successful. So it definitely comes from a slight point of like, you had nothing growing up, so you want to make it. As opposed to being like a trust fund kid who has everything. Like, what's the desire? There's no desire there. I've had everything growing up. I've gone on all these great holidays. My son has gone on more holidays in the last 3 years than I ever did in my entire life.
No way.
So it's interesting.
That's really cool to hear. That makes a lot of sense. It's almost like driven by this deep motivation down below. Okay, that's interesting. Before we wrap towards finishing up, I'd love to ask you a little bit about tech, because I listened to a great podcast you did on AI, and I know we were just briefly chatting about no code before this. Where do you see, I guess, this whole landscape of tech going with no code, AI, software development? Where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years? Because it's so fascinating.
I think it's a bad time to be a junior developer. That's for sure. The tools that are available today versus what was available 5 years ago is insane. So I think what's going to end up happening is there's going to be this sort of natural language way of creating a product. So product people, like people that understand the outcome of the product, are going to become incredibly successful. They might not understand the tooling, like the coding, the language, and all that framework stuff, but they know what the product needs to be. Those people, if they can communicate with AI platforms, Bubble, a perfect example, if you can put together an app without having to know how to code, you're becoming incredibly, incredibly powerful. So I think the outcomes of that are going to be like super interesting product people are going to go out there and build really, really useful apps. And the coding part, it's going to be useful to the top end people, like people that are building really, really intense things. But your basic apps, I think software, like coders aren't going to be almost necessary.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting world that we're going into with AI. I'm excited to see what 3 years looks like, 5 years looks like, where the development can get to, and what kind of things can get out. Like, as it stands today, it's scary. I wonder even, down the road where it will get to.
Yeah, it's such an interesting space, because I think, like, sometimes I look back at like what was last year, what AI was doing, and now what it's doing. I'm like, oh my goodness, like what is it going to be like in another year or another 2 years? And it's pretty scary space.
Yeah, in the car ride here, we were just chatting to ChatGPT about a concept, and we speak fast to ChatGPT because we got to get this done in the car ride. It's like, okay, no worries, I'm going to speak fast to you, and I'm like, how is this happening right now? And it's coming. I'm going to give you some suggestions, and it's just coming up with these perfect suggestions. I'm like, this is incredible in its current format. Once it actually can start doing things and understanding context across multiple different things in your code base, it's crazy.
Oh my
it's
goodness.
Scary, yes.
Okay, so you're developing a concept with ChatGPT on the car ride here.
Yeah.
You can keep that one a secret, but I'm joking. Well, to finish up, we usually finish up with a lightning round of just 4 quick questions. Yep. Bit of fun. I've got them written down here so I don't forget them. But yeah, just 4 kind of fun ones to finish up with a bit of fun. So to kick it off, what is one of your favorite books?
Influence. I'm rereading. Great book.
Okay, is that Robert Cialdini?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay. What's one of your favorite movies or TV shows?
Favorite movie? Anchorman?
Anchorman. Okay,
Does that
wow.
date me a bit?
That's like
Remember
90s,
back in the
isn't
day,
it?
you just quote Anchorman at the schoolyard. It was simpler times.
Oh, that's great. If you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett.
Wow.
Just all the cash.
Just absolute giants of the world, hey?
Yeah.
If you could know the truth to any one question in life, what would you want to know the truth to?
Aliens. Are aliens real?
Really?
Yep, that's a good one.
Okay. Well, let me know if you find that out. I'd be curious to know too. And then the final one is, if you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would you go back and tell them?
Don't worry, you're going to make it.
Don't worry, you're going to make it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. Want to thank you so much for coming on. You've shared so much wisdom. There's so much in it. I want to go back through and read it and write notes about it, because it was amazing. And I'm sure all the listeners are going to get so much from it. So really appreciate you coming on. But yeah, where would be the best place for people to go and follow you, follow your journey? Is there any kind of platform specifically?
Just Instagram for now, yeah.
Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thanks so much, Jacques.
Thanks for having me.
Great chatting with you.
Cheers.